As our disclaimer, this presentation is not legally binding in its own right, and the Federal Transit Administration will not rely upon it as a separate basis for affirmative enforcement actions or other administrative penalty. Conformity with this document, as distinct from existing statutes and regulations, is voluntary only, and nonconformity will not affect rights and obligations under existing statutes and regulations. For our webinar today, we have two primary goals. First, we will provide an overview of common requests and user actions in the NTD reporting system. These are actions such as extension requests or data waivers. Second, we will provide a detailed review of the declarations required for certain NTD reporters, such as the Independent Auditor Statements and APC, which are automatic passenger counter certifications. Here's our agenda for the webinar today. After this introduction, we will be covering how to submit reporter requests, along with all of the different types of reporter requests. We will continue to data waivers and declarations, and then conclude with an overview of the e-file library. This slide identifies the contact information you should use when you're unable to contact your assigned analyst or when you're having technical issues with the reporting system. The NTD Application Support Help Desk is available from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. This help desk should be used as a resource to help with questions regarding requests across all FTA-specific applications and systems, such as login issues, system errors or bugs, or performance issues within the system. The non-technical NTD program support services are staffed by an NTD analyst Monday through Friday between the hours of 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You should contact this help desk if you have any questions or any clarification regarding an NTD policy or reporting requirement. Please note you should only use this help desk when you're unable to reach your assigned validation analyst, as we should always be your first point of contact for these types of questions. My name's Melody Harris, and I'll be presenting the first portion of this webinar. And we also have Lee Lumsden, who will be presenting the second portion. Like Lori said, if you have any questions as we go through the presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. This slide identifies FTA's program contacts. We have Chelsea Champlin, who is the NTD Program Manager for the Office of Budget and Policy, and Melissa Conti, who is the NTD Operations Deputy Project Manager. On this slide, we have the NTD reporting policy manuals for full and reduced reporters. These manuals are very helpful for answering NTD-related questions. The Uniform System of Accounts provides information on reporting financials according to the NTD requirements. All of these resources can be found on the FTA website and at the links listed here on this slide. And to get our presentation started, we'll first take a look at reporter requests that are submitted through the Appian reporting system. There are also some requests that are submitted to your analyst by email, and we will cover those shortly. We will first review in-system reporter requests. These are the requests that are submitted directly through the reporting system. Only users with an assigned role of CEO or CEO delegate can submit this type of request. These include extension requests, primary UZA change requests, APC certifications, and reporting waivers. If you have an assigned role that allows you to submit these requests, you will do so through the annual report package of the relevant fiscal year. You should select the current report year for most requests unless it pertains to a future year. When you access the annual report package, you will see related actions near the top of the page. The screenshot here shows what that will look like. Click this and you will then have several options. One of them is Create Reporter Request, which is the option we're looking for. When you've selected Create Reporter Request, you will then choose the request type. There's a drop-down box with all of your options, as you see here, and we will review each of these in more detail shortly. For all of the requests listed, you'll need to upload a document to your request. This will be a letter that addresses the type of request you are making. Regardless of the request type, this letter should be in PDF format, should be on agency letterhead, and should include the CEO's signature. In this letter, you will explain in detail what you are requesting and why the request is being made, along with any other pertinent information. For example, if you're requesting a waiver because you have not completed your IAS-FD, you'll state in your letter why this was unable to be completed for the related report year and explain how this will be addressed during the next report year. Please include as much detail as you can. This will be helpful to your analyst as we review your request and will make the process go more smoothly. And we'll talk more about putting together a request letter later in the presentation. Once your request is ready, you will submit it by using the Submit button in the bottom right of the request screen. Once this has been done, the request will go to your assigned validation analyst, and then we will move this up to our QA team. If more information is required at this stage, or if updates are needed, the request will be returned within the reporting system and will show up as a task for the CEO and CEO delegate users. That can be opened, updated, and resubmitted from the My Tasks tab by these users. When this is complete, the request will ultimately reach FTA for final approval or rejection. You can track the progress of your request within the eFile library, which Lee will explain later on. And now we will review each type of request that can be submitted within the reporting system. Extension requests are submitted when you would like to extend your annual report's due date. When you select the extension request type from the dropdown, it will prompt you to enter the new due date that you are requesting. This can be requested for up to 30 days after the original due date. You can request an extension based on extenuating circumstances that will prevent you from submitting your report on time, such as natural disasters, audits, and medical leave. This must be requested prior to the report's due date. Please note that extension requests will not be granted when requested for time constraints, unawareness of reporting requirements, employee turnover, or resourcing issues. The fiscal year change request is used when your agency updates the fiscal year on which you operate. For example, if you've historically been on a January to December fiscal year, but you update to a July to June fiscal year, you'll need to submit this request. This is a rare request type as most fiscal years don't change. When you select this request type, the system will show you what your current fiscal year end date is and allow you to select the new fiscal year end date. Depending on what the new end date is, your report due date could also change. As you can see here, we have 3 annual report due dates that are based on the agency's fiscal years: October 31st, January 31st, and April 30th. Your fiscal year end date determines which of these due dates will apply to you. The next request types we will discuss are IAS-FD and IAS-FFA waiver requests. Both of these are in reference to Independent Auditor Statements. One is for financial data, and the other is for federal funding allocation. Lee will go into more detail on these 2 statements later in the webinar, so I won't dive too far into them right now. Just be aware that if you're requesting a waiver for these requirements, you should include in the request letter the information that we previously discussed: what item the waiver is being requested for, why it is being requested, and how this will be addressed in the future. For example, if your IAS-FD will not be completed until a month after the submission deadline, explain this in detail in the waiver request letter. For the IAS-FFA, it is important to note that if this is not completed at year end, a waiver will not always be required. If this is pending and will be completed soon after closeout, please discuss with your analyst. A note will be added to the closeout letter to indicate that this is in progress, and you can provide the completed IAS-FFA to your analyst via email when that's ready. For ISFFAs, the waiver is generally used for first-year requirements when an agency isn't aware that this is needed and they haven't started the process of completing the statement. For both of these audits, we often see waiver requests submitted during an agency's first-year reporting when they are still learning the NTD requirements. It's also important to know that waiver requests are only good for 1 year. If another waiver is needed the following year, then a new request will need to be submitted. The next request type is a primary UZA change request. UZA is an acronym for Urbanized Area. These are the boundaries the FTA uses to determine where service is being provided. If you're familiar with NTD reporting, then you may have noticed that on the B10 form, you can only change your secondary UZAs, not your primary UZA. This change must be submitted as a reporter request. The primary UZA should represent the UZA where your transit services are mainly located, or the main area that is served by your agency. This may change if your transit service undergoes changes, or sometimes during a census year if the UZA boundaries are updated. The last census year was 2020, and those changes went into effect in 2022. The next census year will be 2030. You can review all of the current UZAs by using the census map on the FTA website, and you'll see that link here. The next request type is the reporting waiver. This one is only used in special circumstances. A reporting waiver is requested if an agency is unable to complete the annual report for the current report year. If your agency did not provide any service for the span of a year, you would request a reporting waiver. There are also some extenuating circumstances that may lead to a reporting waiver being requested. For example, if there is a significant natural disaster that causes damage and makes data for the full year unrecoverable, you may request a reporting waiver. Next, we will cover APC certifications. These have previously been submitted through email correspondence with your analyst, but they have now become an in-system request like the others that we have discussed. If you're unfamiliar with APCs, these are automatic passenger counters that some agencies use to collect UPT and PMT data, which is unlinked passenger trips and passenger miles traveled. APCs must be certified prior to being used for NTD data collection. The certification must be done during the first year the equipment is used, and then every subsequent benchmarking year set by FTA, which is every 3 years. The next mandatory benchmarking year is report year 2025. So if your agency operates APCs, you should be submitting a recertification request this year. If you started using APCs in 2024 and completed the certification at that time, you will again need to complete it for 2025 since this is a benchmarking year, and then every 3 years afterward. Additionally, if you install new and substantially different APC equipment, you must complete a new certification at that time. Part of the APC certification process involves comparing manual samples against APC data. If you operate 30 or fewer active vehicles, you need to manually sample at least 15 trips. If you operate more than 30 vehicles, you need to manually sample either 15 trips or half the number of your APC-equipped vehicles, whichever is larger, up to 50 trips. This is the smallest acceptable range for APC certifications, but you can conduct larger manual samples at your discretion. For this manual sample, random selection of trips isn't required. You only have to meet the threshold of sampled trips. These trips can be from any period of time within the report year, but should include heavy ridership trips and at least 1 trip per vehicle type and APC model. I will briefly review what is required in your benchmarking plans each time that you certify your APCs, but you can find more detailed information in the policy manual. There are also further descriptions there of what is required for manual sampling, which we covered in the last slide. Your benchmarking plans must include validation of APC data against a manual sample, a description of your APC system and your sampling procedures, a list of trips that were flagged and rejected with explanations for each, the percentage of trips that do not have valid APC data over the course of a typical year, descriptions of the differences, if any, in the set of distances between stops used to calculate PMT using manual and APC data. Ideally, you'll use the same set of distances for both calculations. And the percent difference of manual versus APC passenger trips and passenger miles traveled, which must be less than 5%. If you have more than one mode and type of service for which you use APC data, you must complete a separate benchmarking plan for each. The exception is if those modes and types of service share the same fleets. For example, if you directly operate a bus mode and a demand response mode, and use the same vehicles interchangeably for both of these services, you will still have to submit 2 requests, but you can provide the same benchmarking plan for each since the fleets are the same. We additionally have a template that contains fields for all of the required data that we just reviewed. If you would like to have that template to work with when completing your APC certification, please reach out to your analyst and we're happy to provide that for you. So now that we've talked about how to submit in-system requests, there are also some type of requests, which are data waivers that get submitted outside of the system. If you're requesting a waiver for a specific data point within your report, then you will work directly with your analyst to request that waiver. If you know there will be some issues with your data, please talk to us about it so we can help determine which data points may be affected and which will require waivers. Once we know which data points will require a waiver, you will submit this request to your analyst by email. This will need to be in the same format as we previously discussed for submitting letters with in-system requests. As a reminder, it will need to be in PDF format, on agency letterhead, and signed by the CEO. In the request letter, you will explain for which data points you are requesting the waiver, how you are currently reporting the data, and how this will be addressed in future years. And we will look at an example of this on the next slide. So for example, let's say that there was a problem with your data collection software that corrupted 3 months of your unlinked passenger trip data. You know that the data recorded for those 3 months is incorrect, but you have no way of determining what the correct data should be. In this case, you would request a waiver for UPT. Again, if you have an issue and you're unsure of which data points are affected, please let your analyst know and we're happy to review that with you. With this example, you would explain in your request letter that you were requesting a waiver for UPT due to an error in your software that affected data for 3 months of the report year, let's say July through September. Make sure to also list the mode and type of service that the data is related to, as some agencies have multiple services. You would also explain how you were estimating data for those 3 months. In this situation, we'll say that we took the months with correct UPT, average that, and use the average to report UPT for the 3 problem months. You would then explain that the issue with your software has been resolved or is in the process of being resolved, and note if your data will be affected for the following year. The more detail you can provide, the better. Your analyst will then process their waiver request, and if accepted, those data points will be marked as waived in NTD's data products for the affected report year. So now that we've covered all the types of requests and data waivers, I'll pass the presentation over to Lee for the next section.
Thank you, Melody. In the next few slides, we will go over the different declarations, who they apply to, and the purpose of each one. So there are two independent auditor statements that FTA requires agencies to complete. There is the independent auditor statement for financial data, commonly referred to as the IASFD. And the second is the independent auditor statement for federal funding allocation data, commonly referred to as the IASFFA. Because these are NTD specific reviews, we will go over what each of these are in depth in the next few slides. Please note that you will hear me refer to these throughout the presentation as IASFD and the IASFFA. So to start, let's review the IASFD. Again, this is the independent auditor statement for financial data. So who does this apply to? The IASFD must be completed by all full reporters, all urban reduced reporters, and any separate service reporters. What does the IASFD entail? The IASFD confirms that an independent auditor reviewed and determines that a transit agency's accounting system meets FTA requirements. And finally, how often is this requirement completed? Because agencies typically don't change their accounting methods, FTA requires a new IASFD to be procured every 10 years or whenever there is a major change to the agency's accounting system. Please note the term accounting system does not refer to the hardware or software program transit agencies use. Therefore, even if the hardware or software changes, this does not inherently mean that the accounting system has changed. If you have any questions on anything specific or anticipate any big changes, you should contact your assigned analyst and they can help you determine if a new IASFD is needed. The IASFD information is input into the CEO certification or the D10 form of the NTD reporting package. This is what the IASFD tab of the D10 form looks like. And you can see from the screenshot that agencies have a couple different options when filling out this tab. So the first question asks whether the agency has an IASFD from a prior year. The agency would select yes to this question if they have an IASFD that was completed within the last 10 years and they do not have a new IASFD to submit for the current report year. If an agency does not have a previous year IASFD, they would select no to the first question, and a second question will be generated on the form. The second question will ask whether FTA has waived the IASFD requirement for the current report year for the agency. If the agency has already discussed an IASFD waiver with their analyst and submitted one through the system, they should select yes to this question. If the agency does not have a waiver, they should select no, and this will generate a final question. And the final question will ask whether you have a new IASFD to upload during the current report year. So your agency should select yes and upload the new IASFD, or if you do not have one, you would select no, and an explanation box will appear to explain why you do not have a new IASFD for the current report year, and you should also explain why you don't have one from a prior report year. Please note when uploading a new IASFD, your agency should also update the completed by and date fields on the form. And when an agency uploads a new IASFD, that agency should select yes to the first question prompt in subsequent years. So if I uploaded in 2025 a new IASFD, in 2026 and future report years until 2035, I would select yes to the first question. As noted before, the purpose of the IASFD is for an auditor to review the financial statements of the agency and determine whether the agency's accounting system meets FTA requirements. For full reporters, this includes reviewing their sources of funds, which is the F10 form, the uses of capital, the F20 form, and all other forms a part of the financial module in the reporting system. For reduced reporters, the auditor would review the reduced reporting RR20 form. During this review, the auditor is looking for confirmation that the agency follows the Uniform System of Accounts, which is the USOA, when reporting data to the NTD. The auditor is also looking to confirm that the agency's accounting system follows accrual accounting or a directly translatable method. NTD requirements state that agencies should report based on accrual accounting, which uses revenue recognition and expense matching principles. This means that revenues are recognized when earned and expenses are matched with revenues in the same period, not necessarily in the same period in which the cash is received or expended. The last thing that the auditor is looking to confirm is whether the agency's financial data is in accordance with NTD requirements. After the auditor has reviewed the agency's financials, they will provide the agency with their IAS-FD. Auditors must state in the IAS-FD if they find that any data does not conform to NTD requirements and describe the discrepancies. The agency must submit the IAS-FD to the NTD through the steps talked about previously on the D10 form. The agency will upload the new IAS-FD and the analyst will review the document provided. If there are any findings or discrepancies noted in the IAS-FD, the analyst will ask the agency about them. The agency should be prepared to explain how they addressed any findings on the IAS-FD and how the agency resolved them. If your auditor has any questions about the IAS-FD, we recommend reaching out to your assigned analyst. And within the policy manual, NTD has provided a template that agencies can provide to their auditor, and that can be found in Appendix A. It is not required that auditors use that template. It is just there for convenience. Let's now review the IAS-FFA. Again, this is the Independent Auditor Statement for federal funding allocation data. So who is required to obtain an IAS-FFA? An IAS-FFA should be completed by any agency that serves a large urbanized area and operates 100 vehicles or more in annual maximum service across all modes and types of service. Please note, a large urbanized area is a UZA with 200,000 or more in population. If your agency does not meet this criteria, you will not complete an IAS-FFA at all. What does the IAS-FFA entail? The IAS-FFA confirms that an auditor has reviewed all NTD data that FTA uses to apportion funds for Chapter 53 federal formula programs. And lastly, any agency that meets the criteria is required to submit an IAS-FFA and must submit this review annually. Just like the IAS-FD, the IAS-FFA information is completed on the D10 form of the report package. For agencies that are required to complete an IAS-FFA, there will be a tab on the D10 form for this requirement. You can see in this screenshot what that tab looks like. Agencies do not actually upload their IAS-FFA to the D10 form, but instead they certify that their auditor has completed the review. Once an agency selects yes, the form will provide a spot for the agency to input the name of the auditing firm in the completed by field and the date the audit was completed. The agency should then list any negative findings they may have had noted as a part of their review. The analyst will review, and if not already done so, will ask the agency to confirm there were no negative findings or provide a response on how the agency addressed any findings. If you have any questions on how to complete this portion of the D10 form, you should reach out to your validation analyst for assistance. As a part of the review, the auditor must review each data point on the Federal Funding Allocation Statistics FFA 10 form. These data points include the fixed guideway and high-intensity bus directional route miles, vehicle revenue miles and vehicle revenue hours, passenger miles traveled, unlinked passenger trips, and operating expenses for each individual mode and type of service the agency reports. Agencies can find the list of the IAS FFA requirements within the policy manual. We're going to go over each of these requirements together really quickly. First, the independent auditor statement must assure all of the following in their issued IAS FFA. They must include assurance that a system exists to record and gather data on a continuing basis. They must include assurance that the transit agency maintains the system for recording data in accordance with NTD definitions. In other words, the transit agency is measuring the correct data and has no systematic errors. The auditor must assure that source documents are available to support the reported data, and the transit agency maintains the system for FTA review and audit purposes for a minimum of 3 years following FTA's receipt of the NTD annual report. The data must be fully documented and securely stored. So this is looking to ensure that previous year data within 3 years is available to the auditor if needed when reviewing. Additionally, the auditor must include assurance that there is a system of internal controls to ensure the accuracy of the data collection process and the recording system, and that reported documents are unaltered. They must include assurance that a supervisor reviews and signs documents as required. This is to ensure that proper channels are created and maintained by the agency to ensure correct information is reported. Continuing with the requirements for the IAS FFA, the auditor must include assurance that the data collection methods are those that FTA suggests, or FTA or a qualified statistician approve the methods as being equivalent in quality and precision. This is indicating that agencies either follow the methods set by FTA or have a reviewed method of their own that also meets the criteria for reporting data. Transit agencies must document and follow the collection methods. Finally, the auditor must include assurance that deadhead miles computed by taking the difference between reported total actual vehicle miles data and the reported total actual vehicle revenue miles are accurate. The rest of the requirements are in the form of documentation. The independent auditor statement must have documentation that reported data has undergone analytic review to ensure that they are consistent with prior reporting periods and other facts known about transit agency operations. They must have documentation of the specific documents reviewed and tests performed. And finally, they must have documentation of how the transit agency reports purchased transportation fare revenues and contract expenses. For example, fare revenues must include all fare revenues pertaining to purchased transportation service, and the agency reports the buyer's contract expenditures, not including the purchased transportation fare revenues. In the policy manual, agencies can find all of the information we have previously talked about for the IAS FFA. In addition to that information, agencies can find a list of suggested procedures that auditors may choose to follow. Similar to the IAS FD, there is a template in the policy manual agencies can provide to the auditor, but it is not required that the auditor use this template. And finally, just like the IAS FD, agencies must provide the IAS FFA once completed and include any information on any negative findings the author may have noted. The agency should be prepared to provide how they addressed and fixed these findings. In the next section, we will discuss the e-file library. The e-file library houses information on the status of your requests submitted through the system, as well as all blast messages sent out by the NTD. When agencies submit a request through the system, like an APC certification or an IAS FD waiver that Melody discussed earlier, or any blast messages from NTD, agencies can review these in the e-file library. You can find the e-file library under the agency's profile in the NTD reporting system. Agencies can filter by different types of requests, different report years, the status of these requests, and even the subject matter of these requests. The most common filter would be sorting by the type of request. Some of the different types of requests would be APC certifications, closeout letters, extension requests, and many others. You can see in the first screenshot on this slide the options to filter the e-file library. Agencies who submit an IAS-FD waiver, APC certification, or extension request may be curious to know what the status of these requests are. Of course, you can always reach out to your validation analyst for the status of these requests, but agencies can also navigate to the e-file library to see this information. Once at the e-file library, the agency has a couple different ways to filter to find this information. You can filter by report year, or the most direct way is to filter by type. For example, if I am looking for information on an APC certification, I would filter the type to say APC certification and select the View Details button for the line item associated with the report year I am looking for. The View Details button is how we will access the information within each line item. After selecting View Details, I would scroll down to review the details related to my APC certification. This would provide any documents that I submitted for this certification. If I'm looking for the status of the APC certification or any other requests, I would look at the status column of the e-file library. In our example, the first APC certification in the screenshot provides the information that this has been approved, and the location even tells me that our quality assurance team has provided this information about the approval back to the agency. This was most likely in the form of an automated email from the NTD system about their APC certification. Lastly, we are going to cover some frequently asked questions that agencies will have about all of the information we reviewed today. First, as Melody went over, the CEO should sign all data waivers as well as any submitted letters from agencies. Each NTD profile has one CEO listed on the agency profile, and the CEO is responsible for the NTD report package, and therefore when an analyst asks for the CEO signature, they are referring to the CEO on the NTD profile and not the CEO of the agency or a city manager. The analyst can confirm with the agency who the CEO is on the profile when discussing any letters that need to be submitted. Additionally, some agencies have asked who can complete an IAS-FD and whether someone from their accounting department or a city official can complete the review. Agencies must have an auditor that is independent of the agency to complete the review, and it cannot be someone who is employed by or affiliated with the transit agency who completes this review. Another issue that analysts sometimes see is on the IAS-FD tab or the IAS-FFA tab of the D10 form, how agencies will input their own agency name or even the person filling out the D10 form in the completed by fields. Agencies should not input anything other than the name of the auditor's firm in the completed by field and the dates that they were completed on the D10 form. To end today, we have put up our information as well as the information for the NTD Help Desk again in case you have any specific questions about anything we discussed today. As always, if you have any questions, you can also reach out to your assigned analyst and they should be able to help you. We will be sticking on for a little while to answer any questions you guys may have if you would like to use the Q&A box to ask those. Thank you all for your time today.